Hi, this is Alan Hess, author of The Palm Springs School, coming out in 2025, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Modernism Week in Palm Springs, California, every February. This 11-day architecture and design festival hosts exciting modernist house tours, insightful lectures, designer shopping, architecture documentary premieres, eye-popping house parties, detailed exhibitions, and much more. And for almost 10 years, U.S. Modernist Radio has been your gateway to all the action, reporting from the U.S. Modernist compound. That would be poolside at the hip Hotel Skylark, interviewing guests in the world of architecture and design. I'm Tom Guild. Over the spring and summer, we'll bring you these one-on-one interviews, plus special guests recorded right here in the studio. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle Square Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Palm Springs, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Toronto. Today, we'll talk to three people who live in and around Palm Springs, the folks who work to document, share, and safeguard Palm Springs' heritage, and who gladly share their stories. First, expert tour guides John Stark and Trevor O'Donnell. Later on, the president of the Palm Springs Plaza Theater Foundation, J.R. Roberts, working to bring back the theater to its full glory. And now, your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Oh, Palm Springs. First, there were the Cahuilla people who relaxed by the natural hot springs for, 2,000 years. And let's be honest, their pool parties were probably way more lit. Then came the Spanish conquistadors, who named it La Palma de la Mano de Dios, which translates to the palm of God's hand. Because, subtlety wasn't their strong suit. I think it was that great historian Monty Python who said, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. Enter John McCallum, a health nut with a fondness for the desert, who moved his family to Palm Springs to cure his tuberculosis. McCallum's arrival sparked many more settlers, lured by the promise of healing hot springs and a place where they could wear linen pants year-round without judgment. Still true today. There's a wildly popular theater in Palm Desert named after him now. The 1920s saw the arrival of Hollywood, where actors flocked to Palm Springs for the sunshine and the peace away from Los Angeles. Fast forward to the 50s, and Palm Springs transformed into a neon-lit playground for Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and also poolside martinis, late-night poker games, and enough cigarette smoke to kill even Joe Camel. We are most grateful, however, to this era for the explosion of modernist houses, most of which survive today. Want to go with U.S. Modernist in February 2025? And stay with our crew at the U.S. Modernist Compound, a.k.a. the Swanky Hotel Skylark? Email me at george@usmodernist.org.
For years, journalist John Stark worked for People magazine. Now in retirement, he's a tour guide in and around Palm Springs, and he is the author of What to See in Palm Springs, a local tour guide tells all. It's an A to Z compendium featuring John's one-on-one past interviews with the architects who made Palm Springs the modernist capital of the world. From the U.S. Modernist Compound Pool, here's George talking with John Stark.
John, I understand you have some opinions on that great tradition called the coffee date.
Well, what it was is I was getting so tired of every time I go anywhere or do anything, I get a survey wanting to know what I thought of the experience. Everybody now wants you to do a survey. I can't stand it. So I decided after having coffee at Starbucks to write my own survey and send out to my friends asking how I could better improve my performance as a coffee date. So I gave choices like A, B, and C. like I wouldn't be caught dead with you again, or
Right.
could you shut up and listen, or get off your phone or something. And, that was fun. I do these for the Desert Sun, and I had one in last Sunday, actually, about what it's really like to be retired in Palm Springs, and that went over very well. Because,
What is it really like to be retired in Palm Springs?
well, you have this myth that you're going to get here and have this great time and all this time, and you're going to take pickleball lessons and you're going to travel, and none of that happens because you're older and all you do is spend all your time going from one doctor to the next.
Ah.
And I point out things like, even in my complex, in the beautiful Palm Springs, I look out my sliders at these gorgeous tropical grapefruit trees laden with fruit. But it's fruit no one can eat because everybody's on statins, so then no one picks them. So I tried to point out all these sort of ironies that happen when you're...
That is right, because grapefruit interacts with statins, right?
Yes, it does, yes. I was talking about friends of mine, and I said, well, we're active, okay? We're active trying to always run from one doctor to the next. Although some of my friends have stayed active that I pointed out, like my friend Bill, he plays tennis every day until he got tinnitus. And then my friend Linda, who plays golf 3 times a week at her mobile home park, was an 18-hole course, except she threw her back out and can't do it. And my friend Greg...
Whoa. You got me. Mobile Home Park has its own 18-hole golf course?
Oh, yeah. You need to go down Valley. They're incredible.
Wow. Okay.
And they have their own restaurants. One out here on Cathedral City has its own nightclub.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they're not like what we think of as mobile home parks, not out here. It's all about style. Everything is here. And then my friend Greg, he's my neighbor, and he was so proud because he rides his bicycle every day, and then he went to the doctor and found out that the friction from sitting on the bicycle seat pushed his PSA levels to dangerous heights. So now he can't ride his bicycle.
I did not know a bicycle seat could do that to you.
I did not either, but he's a doctor, and he said, yeah, it did.
Holy cow.
Who knew?
So that's the realities a little bit of Palm Springs.
The reality of being retired here, it was a parody, so a little exaggeration involved. I got the idea because I was standing in line at my pharmacy when the man in front of me announced to the pharmacist that in 3 days he was retiring. And she said, well, what are you going to do with all your time now? And he said, I'm going to take tennis lessons, I'm going to travel, and I'm going to finally live my dream to have piano lessons. And I thought, good luck. But when I got to the end of the article, I pointed out the fact that I really do hope that he finds the time to take piano lessons. And in fact, my doctor has suggested that I take piano lessons because it's great for arthritis.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering if piano teachers take Medicare.
I love that. Now, your new book is What to See in Palm Springs, a local tour guide tells all, sights, histories, and stories.
Yes.
Thank you for sending me the book.
Oh, good.
I really liked it. It brings a very fresh voice to the tour guide.
Yes.
A different kind of voice than you might see in Photos or Michelin or any of these.
Yeah.
So what was your approach to sharing Palm Springs with people?
Well, I wanted a book that finally, after enough years of being a writer and a journalist, that I would be the editor. And I could do exactly the way I wanted it to be done. When I was thinking about writing a tour book, I had not seen one that was written by a tour guide. So I kind of went with that approach, which gave me the ability to not just present something, but give a history, give stories, give personal notes, give things called detours, things outside the city that relate that you could go see, and a lot of observations about the people here, because I think that's all part of the whole Palm Springs experience.
The whole allure, right?
The whole allure.
Both the current allure and then the allure that is so celebrated, right, from the past.
Yes.
How are those two allures different?
Well, before World War II, Palm Springs was only for the wealthy and the celebrities. And they lived in Spanish revivalist mansions with privacy walls. After World War II, the Modernists came in and said, why can't the middle class live in Palm Springs too? And developed, starting with Twin Palms Estates, affordable housing, beautiful affordable housing. Up until World War II, I think of Palm Springs as being Greta Garbo because it was very private and very, don't look at me, get away from me. After World War II, I think...
What is that famous line she says she never said, I want to be alone?
Yeah. She never said it, huh?
Right.
After World War II, the Modernists came in, and I compare that era to Marilyn Monroe because there it was very exhibitionistic. Look at me. I don't need a lot of landscaping. Look at my house.
Now, in your book, I understand you have a great photo of Marilyn Monroe.
Yes. In fact, I worked very closely with the Historical Society here, And I found a photo that I licensed that has never been published. And it's a beautiful photograph of Marilyn Monroe in 1949. She's at the Racquet Club, and she's with Hugo Bernard. He's the one who brought her here to photograph her. And while she was here, now she had done a couple walk-in parts in movies, but she didn't have a contract. But while she was here, Johnny Hyde, an agent from the William Morris Agency, and he walked out and saw her, and he was gobsmacked.
Sure.
And he signed her to her first contract, which led to movies like All About Eve and getting into the bigger parts. Thing is about Johnny Hyde is he fell madly in love with her.
Okay.
And he left his wife and 4 children for her.
That has happened, yep.
But she didn't want a romance with him. And after leaving his wife a year later, he died of a heart attack.
Oh, okay.
Although it could be a broken heart if you want to kind of romanticize it a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Marilyn would frequent Palm Springs at different times.
Yes.
Until her death.
Yes. One reason I wrote this book is I wanted to set things straight. Tour guides love to stop at Marilyn Monroe's house in Las Palmas. The irony of that is, as I researched it, and the house was built the year she died. So I don't think she could have lived there. In fact, the original owners of the house had given an interview back in the 1970s saying, please get away from our house. She did not live here. But every guide says they did. In fact, I told an owner of a tour company, he said, why aren't you showing Marilyn Monroe? And I told him what I'm telling you. I said she couldn't have lived there because she was dead. And he said, well, that's not proof.
Wow, okay.
Okay. So I tried to set some of these stories straight. In fact, I have quite a bit in there about Marilyn Monroe. The way I did the book is A through Z.
Okay.
So there's like 200 sites, and you can go through alphabetically. And I write about Marilyn with the Forever Marilyn statue because I don't have a house to put her in. Nobody knows where she lived. No, obviously, she probably did anything. She rented or stayed with people. But
yes.
But it's hard to trace back the provenance of people who lived in these houses, you know, because they rented or they had other names or they
stayed with friends for a long time.
Yeah, so it's really hard to say who really lived in some house. I mean, there are some givens like Cary Grant and Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope, but
right.
So I try to dispel that myth about her. And I even say in the book that, you know, that it doesn't matter whether she owned a house here or not. The point is that she had something that every single great star has, and that's called mystery. And that's why we still talk about her.
Today.
Today,
Yes, today.
yeah.
In your book, you also did some, I think, pioneering research on the Native American culture here.
Yes, I researched everything I could about the history of the Agua Caliente tribe here. And then, I was very proud of this. It took me 6 months. I kept bugging the Agua Caliente Tribal Council to please read the book and vet it for me because I wanted it to be accurate. And they did. And they came back and only made some minor changes. They said it was accurate. The only thing that they did not want in the book, and I agreed to take it out, was their burial site. There's a cemetery on Tahquitz that they just don't want tourists going into.
Sure, of course.
So fine, I took that out, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the tribe is an important player in this area because unlike a lot of other locations, they're just not in one place. There's a patchwork of property all across the valley.
Yeah.
And how did that patchwork come about?
Well, it happened in 1864. 2 things happened that year, and one was that John McCullum, the first permanent white settler in Palm Springs, came out here. He was sent by Abraham Lincoln to oversee the Indian lands, and he brought his family and his son. And the reason he stayed is his son had tuberculosis, and he was hoping that the weather out here would cure that. That same year, the U.S. government wanted to build a transcontinental railroad across America, but they needed to go through the Coachella Valley. So what they did is they went and divided up the Coachella Valley, or Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage, and Cathedral City, into a checkerboard, 1 mile square checkerboard. Now, every other square mile was given to Southern Pacific free, no strings, to do whatever you want with it. So that's why Southern Pacific owned so much land out here. And the other square miles they gave to the Agua Caliente Indians as their tribal land.
Okay.
So that still exists. So you need to know if you're living here, if you're buying here, do you want to buy on Indian tribal land or do you want to buy on what's called fee land or private land? And there's a difference because if you buy on private land, you own your house and you own your property. But if you buy on tribal land, you own your house but not the property.
You're leasing it, essentially.
You
right?
lease it, and leases can vary. Now, I know people who pay $200 a month for the lease, and I had a tour yesterday and the man told me I pay $5,000 a month. Yeah, well, he had apparently a huge place somewhere, but you need to know the difference. And the tribe, because it's a separate nation, does not pay city, state, or federal income tax.
Okay.
And they basically have their own rules. The tribe does not have to adhere to preservation laws.
Okay.
So that's why things like the Spa Hotel got torn down downtown. So that's always been an issue.
Has the tribe been around long enough to where they now want to preserve some of their older structures?
I haven't heard that. As I said, it's very hard to communicate with them. They're not public. There's only, 390 of them, something like that.
Okay.
Yes, and they're, of course, extremely wealthy because they own 3 casinos and all this property.
Okay.
But they stay to themselves. They really do.
Okay.
I guess I'm curious as to why was this a checkerboard scheme dividing up the land? You would think they would give the railroad, here's your railroad line and a mile on either side of it, and here's what we're going to give a block of it to everybody else. Do you know why this checkerboard strategy came about?
I'm not sure. I think it's because people had built houses, or the tribe had out here in different locations, and maybe they just wanted to make sure that everybody had some access, their own area.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's all I can figure out
All right.
about it.
Within Palm Springs, what are some of the fun things that you want to point out for people that are going to travel out here? Things that they might not find out if they go to the local visitors center.
Sure. Well, I didn't want the book to be about restaurants. So it's not a book about where to go and have a party or go to have dinner. There's enough guides out there for that, and plus they change continually, the restaurants here. I wanted this to be a book of what to see. In other words, you can get in your car, you can take this book, which I consider for your car or your coffee table, because that's a whole other story about the quality of the book. You're going to find things that you don't find usually. For example, as obscure as something like the very first entry in my book just happened to be Abraham Lincoln's reclining profile. Now, who knows about that? But
I've never heard of it.
at a certain time at evening, about 4 to 5 every night, when the sun goes down behind the San Jacinto Mountains, you suddenly see a reclining profile of Abraham Lincoln. Looks just like him. In fact, there's a picture of him here in the book. And across the street, there's a little kind of like an alley and a gallery, and there are little stores back there. And at the very end is a telescope from the 1920s. And originally, there was a restaurant there called Las Palmas.
Okay.
Or the Palms or something like that. And they put this telescope up that would look up at the mountain at 4 o'clock so you could see Lincoln's profile, and that was to bring customers in. Once you see it, it's very prominent.
Yeah, I guess once you know what to look for, right?
The Cornelia White House. I mean, what is that? Not only do I have photos of it, but I have the history of the White sisters in there who are very, very important in Palm Springs. I mean, Palm Springs was founded by women, tough women. And that applies also to the Agua Caliente tribe, because in 1950s, the Agua Caliente tribe was entirely comprised of women, including the tribal chief. And those women were doers. They went to Sacramento to petition the governor for longer leases. They went to Washington, and they got President Eisenhower's interest. Because up until 1959, the Agua Caliente Indians here only had 5-year leases. That's all they could do, so they couldn't get mortgages and they couldn't develop. Once they got that done, they were able to get out of poverty. And the first building they actually built here was the Spa Hotel, which is now where the Agua Caliente Cultural Center is.
Okay, right.
Which was torn down a few years back. But
Sure.
that's the first project they did, and that lifted them out of the poverty.
That's a great story.
And it was women. I mean, I dedicate the book to a woman named Zadie Bunker. What Zadie Bunker did, she came here in 1918 with her husband, who was a mechanic, garage mechanic. They were married a number of years and had some kids, and then he left her. And she kept all the property. She was smart. She also decided she wanted to learn to fly an airplane because her husband told her she couldn't.
Yes.
So in her 50s, she went and she got her pilot's license, and she had a little airplane she called Granny's Rocking Chair. A few years later, she traded it in for Granny's Rocking Chair 2, which was bigger, and 3 years later, Granny's Rocking Chair 3, which was even bigger. And then she decided she wanted to fly an F-16 jet, and she was allowed to do that. She co-piloted a jet out of Palm Springs Airport and broke the sound barrier. And she was now at this point she's in her 70s. She was one of the first women ever to break a sound barrier. And then she came back and started doing transcontinental air races against men and winning them. And
I didn't even know there was such a thing as transcontinental air races.
well, I think they were from Arizona to Modesto or some strange pattern, or to Fresno, and that's what she kept winning them. Ralph Edwards of Remember This Is Your Life found out about her, and he did a surprise interview with her at the Burbank airport with her family and everybody showing up. And then President Nixon had her to lunch at the White House. And then when we were about to go to the moon, she decided she wanted to be an astronaut. And she applied to be an astronaut. And unfortunately, she died about age 80 before she could get the yes or the no on that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But there were no dedications to her anywhere. So my book is A to Z, Abraham Lincoln's reclining profile, down to Zadie Bunker. So what I did is I went to the cemetery at Wellwood Cemetery where she is buried, and there's just a little ground plaque. I made a paper airplane, and I put it on her plaque, and then I photographed it so she has some recognition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many unsung heroes
Oh, my God.
in any community.
Yeah.
In our case, we are trying to find the unsung architects that didn't get famous or didn't get published in the national magazines, but did incredible work anyway.
Yes.
What are some of your favorite architects in the area, houses you like to take people to and
Well,
see?
I do most of my tours through a company called Celebrity Tours, and that sounds like you're going to go see celebrity houses. I will show a celebrity house if it's architecturally important, like Bob Hope's Mammoth House up on South Ridge, or Cary Grant's, Andalusian farmhouse, or Frank Sinatra's house, of course. But I like to give a history of the city and the architecture. And I was very privileged when I wrote the book that I interviewed 3 architects here, James Chaffee, Chris Mills, and the legendary Hugh Capter.
Oh, yes. Who's still around?
And he's 93 and still working.
Yeah.
Well, I went to his condo, and I asked him about his signature windows. He's got these long eyebrow kind of windows that he does. And he went on this whole thing about how he differed from the Modernist about windows because they all wanted to save money. They used cheaper materials, aluminum, glass, steel. He said they all wanted aluminum framed windows. And he said, those are so ugly. I would never do that. Well, if you want to get a historic plaque on your house now, you better have an original aluminum window and not something nice.
Right.
Then I asked him, there's an apartment complex here called Desert Boutique. I think it was Desert Shadows originally that he designed, and I've always been curious about it. No one's ever written about it, and it looks like Monopoly houses. And I said, are those Monopoly houses? And he said, well, that's what everyone thinks, but no. He said, when I was younger, my family and I would go out to the desert, and we'd find an oasis to go camping. And I wanted to recreate that experience in architecture. So I created these Monopoly-looking houses, which are really tents. They're geometrical tents. And in front of each one, I put a palm tree to further the illusion that you're in an oasis for the night.
Sure.
But nobody knows this. What I loved about him, too, is I looked at his kitchen. I said, he has a beautiful kitchen here in your condo. And he said, oh, do you like it? I got it at IKEA. And then he said, and do you like my backsplash? He said, I was wandering through Lowe's and I saw it and thought that would look nice. So the point is, taste is not about money.
It really doesn't have to be at all.
Not at all, no. Simplicity and style.
I tell people all the time that if they want a modernist house, they can have one. It doesn't have to look like what's on the cover of Architectural Digest or something.
No, in fact, when I was doing my research, Ava Gabor of Green Acres lived out here. Of course, with her mother, Jaja, Magda, and Ava. There were 4 of them. Can you guess how many husbands they had among them?
In the double digits?
22.
22, yes, okay.
That's 2 football teams. Ava Gabor made a very good point. She was an interior designer. That was her real love in life. And she had a shop down at East, where East Palm Canyon meets South Palm Canyon. I read an interview in the Desert Sun because I like to go through the old archives. And she said, okay, all you people coming here doing modernist furniture, anchor each room with an antique piece of furniture or it's going to look like a gimmick. I think people mistake that with modernism. They try to make everything so perfect that it loses its character.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
The book is What to See in Palm Springs. Local tour guide tells all. Thank you, John.
Oh, you're welcome.
That was George talking with tour guide and author John Stark. Trevor O'Donnell is TripAdvisor's top-rated Palm Springs architectural tour guide. A former marketing and publicity executive in the theater industry, he fell in love with Palm Springs, and he restored a classic 1958 post and beam house. For the past 11 years, he has been doing in-depth architecture tours. He's also the social media manager for U.S. Modernist, posting something delicious from the archives every day on Instagram. And I must say he does an excellent job.
He does.
Here's George's conversation poolside with Trevor O'Donnell.
Trevor, I understand that according to TripAdvisor, you're the top-rated architectural tour guide in Palm Springs. Congratulations, man.
Well, thank you. It's quite an honor.
People are calling you from all over the world to come here and see the sights.
It's surprising. I'll meet people for my tours from Australia. Say, what is it that brought you to Palm Springs? And they'll say, we came to take you tour, mate.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm famous in Melbourne. A journalist wrote about me years ago, and so it's nice to know that I'm one of several, and it's nice to know that we're able to show off Palm Springs.
Now, you started out here working for the great guide Robert Imber. Like 14 years ago, roughly?
Yeah, 2011, I think it was. Robert was an extraordinary man, a genius. A true genius. He had an amazing capacity to learn and remember all of the names of the architects, all of the dates of the buildings, and all of the lore that surrounded them.
His signature move, he had a car, right? A special car?
Now here's where I get into trouble. He was a genius, but he was quirky. And he drove a Honda minivan that was not terribly well maintained. In fact, the taillights were literally taped on with packing tape. And he had a tendency to collect things. I'll avoid the H word there, but these Honda minivans have all these storage compartments, and he had them just crammed full of stuff. He had to park the van across the parking lot while the guests were arriving, so they didn't see what they would be riding in. But he gave a little 15, 20-minute presentation at the beginning of the tour, and by the time that presentation was finished, he had cast the spell, and these people would have climbed into any crappy old thing to follow him around town.
And he'd been doing that, since the 80s, I think?
I'm not sure it went that far back, but certainly the first and the one who did it for the longest span of time. Yeah, just one of the nicest human beings you'd ever want to know, and he really did cast a spell. You just couldn't help but fall in love with him. He has a star on the Walk of Fame
here in Palm Springs, down by the Architecture and Design Museum.
Yeah.
And I saw during this trip that Jacques Cossin, who was involved in the formation of Modernism Week, got a star there, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
We can all hope to have a star.
I don't need a star.
When people come and book tours, it's a lot of tours, right? I mean, you're really busy when you're here in Palm Springs.
Yeah, it's crazy. It started out, Robert did about 3 or 4 tours a week in his little Honda minivan. When we started working together, we built that up to 6 to 12 tours a week. When Robert died, I couldn't keep up with the business. I spent November through April just thanking people and saying, I'm sorry, I just don't have the capacity. But I recently formed a partnership with Modernism Week. We run 5 tours a week in a 22-seat coach so that we can handle the capacity without being overly large. The coach is small enough that it's a personal tour. No microphones, no headsets, just kind of a traveling conversation.
And the taillights are not taped on?
We keep it pretty clean, and we don't stow bric-a-brac in the storage compartments.
Yeah. You are also the social media manager for U.S. Modernist.
I am.
I
didn't know that was my title. I thought I just did the Instagram posts.
Well, that is our social media.
Okay, good.
Trevor.
Good.
So
yes,
in case you missed that part. And every day you post something really interesting, either drawn from our newsletter or your own experience or some of our archives. So how do you find the material that you are curating for this allegedly professional stream?
Well, the treasure trove of information is the archive, the magazine library, and the archive of architects and houses. The archive's fascinating. I think you know this. You've assembled it all. But it's fun from my perspective to just dive in and just randomly click on a magazine, pick the date. There's a range in there of dates And I think we're talking just after World War II through 1961.
Okay. The heyday, as it
Well,
were.
the heyday, and it's surprisingly specific. The houses everybody loves, the California Post and Beams, the photographs by Julia Schulman or Ezra Stoller, those all happen within a very specific span of time. But there's so much more interesting stuff. I'm personally fascinated by the origins of American modernism, how that whole idea came across the Atlantic and where it started, and the threads that connect the very earliest modernist buildings to Deco and Streamline Moderne and ultimately the mid-century modernism we all love today. And then how those threads continued through the 70s and into the well, they frayed a little bit.
Yeah, they did.
There. But they've obviously had a profound influence on contemporary architecture. I don't know where you would define what distinguishes vintage from contemporary. I'm putting it somewhere around the turn of this century. But
one of the more entertaining things that you do all the time is dive into the ads that are in these magazines. Tell me about some of those.
Well, the funny thing about the ads is that women were treated abysmally in these magazines. The humor comes from seeing the portrayal of these seemingly drug-addled housewives standing alone in their beautiful room, luxuriating in their new carpet or their new Paul Macabre suite of furniture, but alone. Dressed to the nines in their pleated skirts.
Pearls.
The whole thing, yeah. And I wish I could go back and interview the madmen who sat in the conference rooms dreaming this stuff up, because I want to ask them, what is it about a beautiful woman standing alone in a luxurious new interior that would make the readers of the magazine want to buy that stuff? I can't help thinking it was the madmen sitting in the conference room who wanted a pretty model in their photograph, and I don't know that they were thinking too much about how it actually worked.
It seemed like one of the themes that I saw in those ads was you'd have this woman, sometimes an actual photograph, but often a drawing, and she would be splayed out on some kind of bear rug, and it would be an advertisement for brick.
Yes, and there's one where she's holding a bowl of fruit. She's on her new carpet.
Okay.
In this beautiful modernist living room, and she seems to have stumbled in a drunken stupor, but she's having a good time.
Yeah.
And she's lying on the floor with her bowl of fruit, looking up at the camera, which I'm assuming is meant to be the husband, who has just arrived home from his hard day at the office, and finds his wife staring out of it. Hi,
with
honey.
a bowl of fruit.
I was going to bring you this fruit, but
help me up, please.
They're tragic.
Yeah.
Because they were a very unfortunate portrayal of women at that time.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of women who are probably very glad that those portrayals are a thing of the past. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole idea of a lot of the technology coming out then, it was going to make the woman's job, which was homemaking, easier. So it was all these ads about the conveniences of the dishwashers that were coming out, the trash compactors, the disposals, everything.
Yeah.
That was going to make home life easier.
So much easier, but she was still the one in the kitchen doing it all.
Yeah. You didn't see any professional images of women.
Secretaries, very seldom. No, my goodness. I'm sort of scanning all of them in my mind now. Nope. Occasionally a mention of a professional, a designer typically.
Or a professor somewhere, a Florence Knoll.
No, it was very much a man's world because the men were writing and publishing the magazines and
Palm Springs, after the 60s, went into a decline for a while. It was not the great place people wanted to move to or build. And in a way, that was a good thing because it meant that buildings weren't destroyed.
Right.
And whole neighborhoods weren't wiped out like they have been in so many places in the country. What caused that decline, and how did they pull out of it?
Well, it had to do with golf resorts, I think, primarily. There was a huge demand for golf. If you're of a certain age, you can remember Bob Hope and Bing Crosby and
Dinah Shore,
their cohorts on TV, literally holding golf clubs and yakking about life in Palm Springs. So golf became huge. Golf, of course, requires land. All the land in the village of Palm Springs was pretty much occupied, so they started moving east, down along the foothills into Rancho Mirage, Palm Desert, Indian Wells, La Quinta, just stretching all the way down. And the resorts they built were built around golf courses primarily. And the interesting thing is that Palm Springs began as a Spanish colonial revival town. All of the architecture before the war was Spanish. Mid-century modern kicked in, 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s. And then they started moving down to these golf resorts, which are all now being designed in the Spanish style. So that mid-century modern era fit right there. But modern architecture kind of petered out in the 70s, and I think that was another reason people migrated east. Hollywood started moving into gated communities like the Thunderbird Country Club. I had a wonderful neighbor named Mary who was 92 years old, used to run a jewelry store here in downtown Palm Springs, and she would describe what it was like to live in this village with these incredibly famous movie stars, Bette Davis, and Cary Grant and so forth, and how casual it all was. And they weren't harassed by autograph seekers. It was the sort of unwritten rule here that you didn't bother the stars. But I think that changed as the middle class started coming into Palm Springs, and so the movie stars felt the need to move into more exclusive communities. I don't know. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's very good.
There's no simple one answer that says everybody up and left on Tuesday because, thus and such. But
and then it all started to come back in the 90s with the renovation of the Kaufman House and others.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, mid-century modernism is hot again.
Hot again, yeah. Gay men started coming in the 80s, buying and restoring homes. And that kind of set off the trend. There's a neighborhood called Warm Sands. It was a cluster of these wonderful old middle-class resort complexes, small, maybe 12 rooms around a pool. And people started buying them and opening them as gay resorts. And that kind of started the trend, reversed the... It was fascinating to be here back in the 90s. You'd see these seniors with mobility issues.
Yes.
Working their way down Palm Canyon Drive, and gay men, this weird combination of very old seniors who had sort of missed the migration train, and all of these gay men who were flocking into Palm Springs. But that sort of kicked it off, and boom. And
then Modernism Week started around, I guess, 2004, 5, something like that.
I think we're at 20 years now,
Yeah, about 20 years.
Which I understand was just a group of vintage furniture dealers who came together to do a show at the convention center. And very modest affair, one weekend. Now, I think we're shooting for somewhere around 125,000 people to come in from all over the world, which is a huge...
It's very huge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the biggest collection per square mile of houses anywhere in the world that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
There are areas that might have more, but they're over a much larger area.
Yeah, if you figure the whole L.A. area, there's significantly more mid-century modern architecture, but you won't find as dense a concentration as we have here.
And particularly so many neighborhoods where you go in and everything is that way.
Yes.
You're transported back in time.
It's interesting, though, because it's sort of a revisionist image of what those mid-century... You're talking about the Alexander tract home communities.
Yeah.
There was 6 or 7 full neighborhoods just filled with classic mid-century modern homes, all of them built by the George Alexander Construction Company, which is Palm Springs' version of the Eichlers in the Bay Area. They were modest affairs. They were simply put together. They were considered weekend homes or vacation getaways. They were purely seasonal. That lumber was coming down out of the Pacific Northwest on trains and going right into the buildings. If you look carefully at some of those beams, you'll see them having torqued as they drive.
Yes.
The kitchens were the equivalent of what we would call IKEA kitchens. Very basic. Plywood with hairpin legs and simple masonite pegboard sliders in the cabinet doors.
Yeah.
They were not luxurious, but they were
usually colorful. Or had textures on them.
Yeah, very modern. They were furnished with up-to-date furnishings. Although, it didn't stop people from packing up the U-Haul in Milwaukee and coming down with Grandma's Victorian sideboard.
Yeah.
When we first came out here, it was fun to go to the open houses because you'd see these classic butterfly-roofed mid-century modern homes filled with all kinds of unfortunate styles of furniture that didn't quite live up to the vision. But today people buy them, they have to bring them up to a contemporary standard. People don't want the galley kitchens anymore. They want the great room with the party.
And the island.
And so I've asked Bill Kreisel. Bill Kreisel, of course, was the Alexander Company's chief architect, and I asked him once, how do you feel about what people are doing today when they pull out? He said, that's fine. That's, they should be adaptable. He actually, Chris Menrad always says that when he called Bill Kreisel to restore his Twin Palms Estates Alexander home, the first thing Kreisel said to him was, well, no one expected them to last this long.
Right, sure.
Well, they were, tract homes. They were impulse buys.
And during the pandemic, a lot of people moved here and real estate prices shot up.
It's crazy, yeah. There are vast neighborhoods of Alexander tract homes that were deliberately pitched at middle-class buyers. Folks who couldn't afford the more glamorous neighborhoods of Vista Las Palmas and Old Las Palmas. Small homes, 1,200 square feet or 1,400 square feet. Very stylish.
Very stylish.
Very stylish, but quickly built out of simple materials. But the idea was you could buy them for $12,000, which was a nice weekend getaway from L.A. or San Diego. Those same houses today are going for $1.1 million.
Wow.
Yeah, it's astonishing. There's the thought of buying a 1,200 square foot home, however stylish it might be, for $1.1 million is a lot.
Yes, I'm reminded from the old Austin Powers movies when he talks about $1 million and how little it was. And that was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
Now it's kind of chump change for a lot of real estate.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a 3-bedroom home in a nice neighborhood here for under $1 million.
How do people find out about your tours, Trevor?
I think I'm findable. I must be findable on the internet. Most of the people are looking for what to do in Palm Springs.
Okay.
When they arrive, most find me on the internet because my website is optimized well enough, and there's a significant amount of word of mouth. I'm very fortunate that people go back home and say, oh, when you go to Palm Springs, you really ought to look up Trevor.
So do you have a website?
I do.
And what is it?
It's PS, as in Palm Springs, architecturetours.com.
Okay, last question. Mm-hmm. In your most recent blog post, you talked about 2 inane radio ads you heard for arts organizations.
Oh, well, why do you always drag me back to this?
So tell me what you heard. I think one was for an opera company.
Don't get me started. Do we need to tell folks why you're asking me about arts organizations?
Well, Trevor was a consultant to arts organizations and directed them and has posited for years how they make very common mistakes in how they market. Mm-hmm. They market to a kind of imaginary customer, not the real customers that they want to get, that they want to attract. And therefore, they don't do very well, and yet they keep doing the same mistakes over and over. Have I gotten that pretty much concise
right. I wrote a book called Marketing the Arts to Death. Yes,
okay.
that's the through line there.
Available on Amazon, right?
No, it's no longer available. You can write to me, and I'll send you an e version. But,
So, what's an example of some of this? Is inanity? Is that a word?
inanity, yeah. It's people talking this weird language that emerged in the middle of this mid-century modern marketing language, where arts organizations tell you how wonderful they are. Because back then, people thought they were wonderful. So all they had to do was say, hey, remember how wonderful we are? Come to our gallery exhibit, come to our opera, come to our show, blah, blah, blah. Well, people don't think they're quite so wonderful anymore. There's a whole new generation of people who need to be spoken to in a more direct, down-to-earth language. But the arts organizations have not gotten the message, and they keep talking this. You referenced these two ads I heard. One was for the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, and no, I don't mind mentioning their name. The most absurd, insider, artsy-fartsy blather. So dense and so abstract that I didn't have a clue what they were talking about or why I should even bother thinking about going to the museum. And it's very sad because these arts organizations have all suffered devastating losses during the pandemic. Their audiences have shrunk, but they still haven't learned how to stop talking down from their lofty pedestals and talk to real people about things they should do.
Yeah, you have to meet your audience where they are, not where you are necessarily.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And you have to respect the fact that younger people don't know the conventions. If you're going to publish a brochure full of people in tuxedos, it's not going to resonate.
You can find Trevor O'Donnell at psarchitecturetours.com or through modernismweek.com during the season. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, George. It's a pleasure as always. And I haven't done my post today, so I need to go home and dig something out of the archive.
George was talking with tour guide extraordinaire Trevor O'Donnell. Architect J.R. Roberts is the former mayor of Sausalito, California. Now he lives in Palm Springs, where for a while he was vice mayor, city council member, and planning commissioner. He owned 2 architecture and design firms and was the first managing director of the Palm Springs Art Museum Architecture and Design Center. In addition to continuing his design practice, he is currently the president of the Palm Springs Plaza Theater Foundation, working to bring the Plaza Theater back to its former glory. It's not a modernist building, but it's an important building and it's close to the heart of folks in Palm Springs. Here's George talking poolside with J.R. Roberts.
The Plaza Theater is one of the great landmarks of downtown Palm Springs. Why is it so important?
You know, George, we have people come from all over the world to look at and love Palm Springs. And our vintage is what makes us unique and special.
Yeah.
You know, the whole Coachella Valley is a beautiful place, and it's great recreationally, and everybody gets gorgeous mountain views and so forth. And we're a beautiful resort town. But Palm Springs' sort of magical history and connection to Hollywood is what makes us unique and special, and why something like Modernism Week can even exist here.
Yeah.
Our architecture is great and unique and exciting, but a lot of that excitement about Modernism Week also comes from our connection to Hollywood, and that's another whole story. But why specifically is the Plaza Theater important? Yeah. It was sort of ground zero. It was the living room for Palm Springs in the days that it was built. In 1936, there wasn't a theater. And as Palm Springs started to grow and become Hollywood's playground, this is where people gathered. This is where films premiered. There were 3 or 4 major Hollywood premieres that actually happened here. And I don't mean just local premieres, I mean world premieres. So the Plaza had its place, not only in history, but in Hollywood history. Celebrities came and lived here. This is where they came to let their hair down. And they would come and perform here. You had people like Bob Hope doing live radio shows out of the Plaza Theater. So when you think in terms of history...
Now, if you're under 30, you need to be Googling Bob Hope right now to see what an impactful performer this guy was, because I know that there are going to be a lot of people that go, Bob Hope? Who was that? Keep going.
That's, by the way, and that's worth the Google time. Yeah, you'll definitely get your money's worth. Yeah, so it's an icon, and it's probably one of the most important puzzle pieces to our past.
How many people does it seat?
It currently has 800 seats in the restaurant.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that big.
No one does. It's always a surprise. Even when you're in it, you don't take the magnitude of the size. We'll be reducing that probably by about 70 seats to make room for ADA compliance, to make a bigger or wider seats for today's audiences.
Okay. Now, the Plaza Theater operated for a long time. When did it start to go into decline now that you have to save it? When did it kind of taper off?
Well, small movie theaters have always been a challenge for those that own them and operated them. And the real decline probably happened about 10 years ago when the theater shut down. But there was a moment in time when I think Metropolitan Theaters owned it. And it was the time of the 70s where multiplexes were happening and large auditoriums were getting split to be more profitable.
Oh, right.
So you could have multiple films in a former auditorium. So you'd have two major motion pictures, Planet of the Apes and, let's say Jaws running.
The Way We Were.
Yeah, 2001 Space Odyssey. Playing at the same time with a narrow wall that wasn't well insulated, so you'd get sound bleed. So I would say that was the beginning.
Did they divide that theater?
They divided it. There was a wall that ran down the middle of the theaters.
Okay.
So in the late 80s, early 90s, Sonny Bono comes on the scene. And Sonny Bono...
Again, be Googling this. Sonny Bono of Sonny and Cher, famous musical duo, also later mayor of Palm Springs.
Well, more importantly, I don't think anybody has to Google Cher, do they? I think most people know. I think more people know about Cher than they do Trump or Biden at this point, don't you think?
I don't know.
Cher is pretty out there in the world.
She is still out there, still going.
I think she's crossed generations. I know she's near and dear to my heart, but that says a lot. So Sonny Bono comes along and he decides that he's going to reshape Palm Springs and make us a better place and a better cultural icon. And he starts the Palm Springs International Film Festival. And he starts it in that theater. And that theater, being the Plaza Theater, gets a remodel. And then a showman comes along by the name of Riff Markovitz, and he decides he wants to put on Radio City Music Hall type show in Palm Springs.
Okay.
Do they need to Google Radio City Music Hall, or do you think?
I think they know that one.
You think they know that one? Okay, good. Then they're my people.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they put together a show called The Fabulous Palm Springs Follies. The Follies ran for 23 years, and it was essentially a bunch of seniors that put on this high-kick, big costume, bigger than life show, and it ran.
Like, hey kids, let's put on a show.
Well, and even bigger and gayer than that.
Yeah.
There were more sequins in that theater than I think there are in the country or the world for that matter. The show was big and glam and neon-y and fun, and it was lots of high kicking. But what was remarkable was the age of the performers. And so a lot of them were retired show people that still had their bodies and still had their strengths, and more importantly, still had their passion. And I think you had to be over 50 to become one of the Follies. And for every opening, I think 100 people showed up to interview and audition for those seats. So you got big names that would come and do short runs in the theater. So the Follies ran for about 23 years, and then the Follies closed. And the city of Palm Springs actually owns the building.
Okay.
And it had been leasing it out to things like the Follies. So at that point, the theater's in a big level of decay. The Follies in its final 10 years wasn't really making money anymore. They were basically bussing in people from all over to fill the seats. And not only were seniors performing, it was really targeted to other seniors. So that's who was coming.
Yeah.
It wasn't targeted to younger audiences, although a lot of us loved it just the same. So the theater then just closed with no future.
And when was that?
I think the official close would have been early 2000s.
So now you're in a capital campaign to raise money. How much do you need to fix it up?
Well, to do the full restoration is $26 million.
Okay.
We now have that money. We raised $16 million of it, and the city of Palm Springs has invested the rest. The foundation, which I created early on when I started this, has 3 years to pay the city back $10 million. Ultimately, that won't be too hard because we've applied for things like historic tax credits, and we have some great donors, and I think we will do that. The foundation will stay alive for probably the life of the theater. most people know that small theaters like this don't make money,
Right.
and their programming needs to be subsidized. So the foundation will go on and do that.
Okay.
We'll have very high quality entertainment, and it will be a true diversity of entertainment where we'll do film and live theater, and we'll do live music and lecture series and kids programming and you name it. And the theater will be state of the art, fully restored.
Right.
So it'll look like 1936, but inside the walls it will be a state of the art theater.
Excellent. Now, I know for a while the Annenberg here, which is a similar size theater, I would think, maybe a little smaller, was doing all these kinds of entertainment venues, and they've stopped doing that, I understand. So you've got a nice place to have these events now once it gets going.
It's true. The Annenberg's about 400 and, I'll get this wrong, somewhere around 440 seats.
Yeah.
The Plaza Theater Complete will be about 730 seats.
Yeah.
And then the next largest venue like this would be the McCallum, which is about 12 or 1,300 seats. So we're kind of the perfect in-between. The Annenberg is really there in service to the Palm Springs Art Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And the new director pretty much reeled it back and said, we're not renting it anymore. We're not giving it away anymore. This is really for our personal programming, for museum-type programming.
Sure.
So the opening of the Plaza becomes very, very important for a venue here.
When do you anticipate it opening up?
We actually broke ground in March of this year, and we've been going gangbusters, and it's going really, really well. We're excited. So we're saying it's going to be somewhere between 12 months and 18 months from March of 2024.
Okay.
Our contractor tells us a year. We're
Well,
figuring
yeah,
about
right.
18 months.
Yeah,
We
that's-
are opening up a building from 1936.
Yeah.
So, if Jimmy Hoffa's not in there or we don't find other problems, we think we'll move quickly.
Are you going to have those little things on the back of the seats like they have in places where you can buy a plaque for a seat and donate some money?
Oh, George, you're a man after my own heart. Of course we're selling seat
Yes.
names. And there are a number of them still available, as a matter of fact.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we do. We have a seat program, and someone can buy a seat, and we'll have placards on every seat, you bet. And we have other naming opportunities in the building as well.
I bet you do. I bet you do. We have an art museum in our area in North Carolina, and they have a very small theater that they remodeled, and they had a seat naming thing. And I asked, what can you put on it? And he said most people put, in loving memory of Mom or my dog or whatever else. And I didn't have anything in that genre I wanted to do, so I thought about it one day, and my plaque says, I'm going to be back here in just a minute. George Smart.
So,
let me know, and I'll see about getting one for out here.
I've had some other odd requests, some that are probably not appropriate
Yes.
for this environment, but we're being pretty flexible and open.
Good.
It is Palm Springs after all,
Right.
and they can Google that.
They can Google that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, anytime.
Where can people donate if they want to contribute to this effort?
If you go on the World Wide Web to Google, the Google machine, you
Please
will
Google World Wide Web, a term we're not using anymore, but we'll just let him go on that one. Keep going.
So basically, if you Google Save the Plaza Theater, we'll come up. We come up first, and we have a really elaborate site. And don't go there just to donate. It gives the history and great photographs, and we have a really, really nice website, and you can learn all about it. And if you want to get involved, there's lots of opportunities, and you can reach me there directly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thanks for listening. Want to go with us to Modernism Week in February 2025 and stay with the U.S. Modernist crew at our compound, aka the Hotel Skylark? Email me at george@usmodernist.org. Okay, Tom, it's all yours.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 20,500 significant modernist houses, and access 4.3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with Kelly Policelli on guest research. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another taking in the premiere of a new architecture documentary at the gorgeous theater of the Palm Springs Art Museum edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.